This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Sports Interaction. Sports Interaction is your homegrown sportsbook where local takes on an entirely different meaning, focusing on the teams, games, and players that matter to you. Sports Interaction is on the ground, on top of local trends, and offering prop bets that you never even imagined existed. And now they're introducing the Locker Room, the first of its kind in Canada, a live watch party for the biggest games of the week. Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Go to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to open an account and bet local. 19 plus, please play responsibly. If you have questions or concerns about your gambling or the gambling of someone close to you, please go to connexontario.ca.
I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Big Money Siege, we have a packed show today. We got to talk about where we're at when it comes to neck guard protection in the NHL. Some NHL teams may be looking into that. Charlie McAvoy getting suspended 4 games. Nicklas Backstrom stepping away. You wrote a piece in The Athletic about some rookies approaching their 10th game. All of that has to come second place today to the Ottawa Senators. Over the last week, I have to imagine, if you are a fan, tough time. Just let me, if you don't mind, I want to go through a timeline here, just of some things that have happened over the last few days. You know, your last place in the Atlantic Division, Thomas Chabot is out 4 to 6 weeks with a fractured hand. Shane Pinto suspended 41 games for a gambling infraction. Evidence found that Ottawa was at fault for the Evgenii Dadonov aborted trade from Vegas to Anaheim for basically not disclosing specifics of a no trade clause. And then Pierre Dorion fired as general manager yesterday. Interim GM now Steve Staios, which sort of means that Steve Dangle was right in predicting that he'd be GM of the Ottawa Senators. And Michael Andlauer, he let it fly yesterday at that press conference. CJ, what have you made of the Ottawa Senators last few days, and specifically yesterday's events?
Well, look, it's been a tough stretch. There's no way around that. I mean, that's a season's worth of, tough news packed into a week and a half or whatever it's been. It does, now that we've learned a little bit more about what happened in the Dadonov situation, I think it was an untenable situation in terms of keeping Pierre Dorion. Might have been the one word that stood out for me that Michael Andlauer used in the press conference was negligence, which seemed to me to suggest the Senators felt that they maybe even could have tried to terminate Pierre Dorion with cause, meaning they wouldn't necessarily have to pay him. Obviously, that didn't happen. I think they negotiated his exit. That's why it was branded a resignation officially. I'll remind you as well that Mike Babcock departed Columbus with a resignation, not a firing. And so, yeah, I mean, pretty eventful period here. And, it'd be interesting to see how they respond. I don't know I don't know to what degree this gets into a dressing room. Let's face it, the best players on that team are all pretty young. I'm not sure how concerned they are with what's going on in the front office, but you can't deny that the entire environment around that team and some of it for the positive, but in the last 2 months has changed, right? You've got new ownership. All of a sudden you've got, Steve Staios being installed as the president, now the interim GM. You have Daniel Alfredsson back around the team and on the ice. There's been a fair number of changes there, and Pierre Dorion had been the general manager for the last 8 years in Ottawa, was an assistant GM before that, so was a real mainstay in that organization. And, in the last year, you've had him depart. His 2 assistant GMs have departed in the last year and a half. And so there's been a lot of turnover and stuff going on behind the scenes. And, losing a first-round draft pick, I mean, we haven't even got to that, is, that's difficult. That's tough. I mean, a team like Ottawa, we're expecting them. They're losing that draft pick in 24, 25, or 26. And in that period of time, Ottawa's expecting to be a playoff team, right? And so the first rounder might not be that high in those years necessarily, although we'll see where it's going this year with the way things have gone. But, you'd want that pick, say, to make a big trade at a certain point in time, or, there's just value to that asset that is tough to replace. And I think that was part of the frustration you heard from Michael Andlauer in his press conference, is he's just saying he doesn't understand why this wasn't decided ahead of time. And, why he's essentially inheriting this punishment.
What was it like just seeing all of these events just kind of happen one by one? You mentioned it, like the fact that it's kind of happened over a week. It's one thing to kind of add context to why these things are happening, as you just did now, but as your job as an insider and just staying on top of stuff, like I know for me, just seeing it from a distance, I'm just like, what the hell is going on? Like you kind of figure that these are things that would happen in the old Eugene Melnyk era, not in this new era. Like I'm beside myself at how all this just kind of came to a head over the last few days.
Well, I mean, look at the Pinto situation is specific to an investigation that happened, and that took some time. But I'm led to believe that there was a lot of nuance to that situation. It wasn't a clear cut, this is what he did wrong. I think that there had to be a fair bit of due diligence done before a punishment was handed out there. And then obviously his punishment was negotiated as well with the NHLPA. And so, I think that timing is less puzzling to me. If I could get one, if we're playing like a game show here and I get like one question that I can ask that has to be answered truthfully, I'd honestly love to get to the bottom or know why it took so long for there to be punishment in the Dadonov situation. Because, we're talking about the original trade, the one where, basically what I've been able to uncover through my sources, Julian, is on the trade call when Ottawa traded Dadonov to Vegas, there was a specific question asked, does Dadonov have any no trade protection or clauses in his contract? And Pierre specifically said, at least according to my sources, no, he didn't submit the list. And so, I mean, you can understand if that's what's contained in that 73-page report the NHL put together, why he's no longer the GM. I mean, it's basically either he forgot about it or he outright lied or whatever, but it's you can't really come back from that. And so given that trade was made in the summer of 2021 and we're sitting here almost at the start of 2024, it's not clear to me why that took so long for a ruling. And I asked some people involved and couldn't really get a straight answer. A lot of people, there's multiple teams involved in this. A lot of people from the other teams are saying, like, I don't get it either. But I think that's where a lot of Michael Andlauer's frustration was. I mean, I know he made a comment about Shane Pinto during that press conference, but really what I was hearing is I think he just would have liked to have known where this was headed when he was buying the team. I don't for a second think he was going to not buy the team, though, by the way. Like, I've seen that out there. It's like, dude, if you're buying a big fancy house and you don't like the way one room's painted or whatever, if you want to change the countertop in the kitchen, while those are significant enough renovations, it doesn't usually keep you from buying the house. And so I think he would have bought the Sens. He just would have liked a better idea of exactly what he was buying. That's the way I interpreted his words anyway in that press conference.
So you don't think he's going to push back on going to the league and be like, hey, I didn't know this sink was faulty in my house when I bought it? You don't think he's going to go back to the NHL and try to make a bigger stink of it?
Oh, for sure. I think he is. I mean, look, the path is here. I don't know if you remember the situation where Ilya Kovalchuk initially had what was ruled to be an illegal contract with the Devils, and the Devils were given basically a first round pick as penalty for essentially trying to circumvent the salary cap with the way they structured that contract. And it was a similar thing. I don't remember the years off the top of my head, but there was a choice of years and the Devils just kept punting till it got to the last year. And then the NHL said, you know what, we're going to rescind that punishment. To me, that's the pattern you follow here. If you're Ottawa, you're basically in your mind saying that's going to be our 2026 first rounder. And we're going to be on best behavior these next couple of years. Keep maybe bringing it up when there's a board of governors meeting and Michael Andlauer's there, gets a chance to maybe see Gary Bettman at a cocktail reception or for a coffee in the lobby of the hotel, and maybe just remind him, hey, we really like that punishment taken away. That's not saying 100% it will happen, but I think the path is there. Like, if history gives us a path to get on best behavior, Michael, get a new GM in, don't cause any problems, don't hold many press conferences like that. Like, I think he gets one. I think, like, as much as we all loved it, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, I found that to be a gripping press conference.
Yes.
And I would love to hear NHL owners speak that candidly and emotionally on big issues all the time. There's a reason why it doesn't happen. And so, yeah, he's not getting fined for that one, but I have to believe he probably can't have too many press conferences like that or it's going to become a problem. But basically, put your head down, do your work, and hope by 2026 the league's taking away that pick. And maybe they never do end up paying the punishment. We'll just have to see how that goes.
No wonder we didn't bring up the first round pick. The Ottawa Senators want us to forget about it.
Well, I mean, I guess the tough thing is when would that decision come? Like that decision might not come until, I mean, they might still not be able to trade it, if you know what I'm saying. Even if they end up getting to keep it, they might just say right before the draft or whatever, after the draft lottery, do you know what, you can keep this. I mean, either way, it's not a good situation. But lots of teams waste their first round pick with the selection they make. So, I mean, it's also not, it's not the end of the world. I've seen a lot of commentary on this. I mean, the first round pick, basically when you do something to circumvent the rules, to potentially give yourself an advantage over other teams. I think in this case, like what's maybe lost a little bit is two teams on the back end of this got screwed over, right? I mean, first of all, Vegas, they took a PR hit on that trade, right? The way that, if you go back and look at the coverage at the time, I've been saying that. I was able to dig up some tweets. Like it was a lot of like, this is Vegas mistreating players again, this and this and that. And even Anaheim was going to make a deal that I think that they liked. They were getting a draft pick with Dadonov. They were unloading Ryan Kessler's contract, and he was, injured for his career at that point in time. They were going to trade John Moore, they had just acquired in the Hampus Lindholm deal from Boston. So obviously they took on that money from Boston, probably with the idea that they could trade it on somewhere else. And so, two teams got screwed over on the other end of that because of, what was essentially a misrepresentation of the facts on the trade call, the original one with Ottawa and Vegas. And so I think that there should be a strong punishment. I get that people say, well, this isn't as bad as what Chicago did. That's not, to me, that's not the argument in this case. If you want to use it to go back and say, hey, do you know what? That Chicago did not get penalized to near enough degree. That's totally fair. But I don't think you can use Chicago in reverse and say, well, they shouldn't be giving up a first round pick. I do think that was a significant violation committed by the Senators organization. And it had nothing to do with Michael Landauer at the time, but he bought the Senators organization. So much, if we're going to use the buying a house theme again, when you buy a house and then you find out 6 months in that there's a cracked pipe, you got to deal with it. Even if you maybe wished you had known before you bought the house. I mean, that's just kind of, once you buy it, you assume kind of some liability. And that's really where I think he's at. And I understand his frustration. I'm not being critical of him. In fact, I think if you're a Senators fan, you probably like hearing your owner come out and sort of be that fiery and defend your team. And I think that everyone wins in a sense with the way he went there. And he was right on the line, though. I got to think of, I would love to have had a live cam on like Gary Bettman or Bill Daly as that thing was going on, because the way that we were all enjoying it, I can't imagine, the league doesn't tend to do business this way, right? There's a reason we're all freaking out about that press conference. It's because that's not like what we usually see in these situations.
You're absolutely right. I'm also glad you brought up Chicago in that last part, just because there are a lot of people who are looking at the punishment that the Ottawa Senators got and don't seem to understand why Chicago, in light of what happened with Cal Beach, didn't get a similar punishment. And while I think it's one thing to explain it, that because of the violation of league rules and comparing it to what Arizona went through when they were punished for illegal workouts and all that, I think some people will still kind of look at that and be like, well, you still have to compare. Those were still really serious situations. I know you kind of touched off on it, but what have you made of people comparing those two situations with regards to Ottawa and Chicago?
I understand the comparisons, but I think we have to put them in two boxes if having a discussion about it. What Arizona and Ottawa are found to have done when they lose their first round picks is explicitly break NHL rules to try to gain an advantage over the other teams. And so you're getting a first round pick docked in that case because it's disadvantaging you now. It's saying you did that and you should have done that, and now you're at a disadvantage compared to the other teams who all get to keep a first round pick from those years. What the Blackhawks organization and the senior people involved in it did was horrific. And I'm all for an argument saying that the Blackhawks should have been hit with a larger penalty than the $2 million fine.
I think they should have lost the draft pick, to be honest with you.
But I would say the reason they don't lose a draft pick in that case is because they didn't do anything that was trying to give them an advantage over other teams. Again, I'm not excusing the behavior, and I'm not, but it really, what they should have, maybe what we should be saying is it should have been a $20 million fine, right? Like, because you're hitting ownership then on that. And look, I think at the time we said it felt light as a punishment. So this isn't just hindsight.
Absolutely.
But I do think the I just think they have to be treated a little bit differently because of the nature of the rule broken. And, I'm all for saying that they should have had a bigger punishment at the time. Like that's not, to me, that's not a hot take. And I know a lot of people, including us, were making that point in real time when the Block and Jenner report came out.
Absolutely, and a lot of us were trying to make the point with regards to Chicago and Ottawa that because of the fact that this is a league violation as opposed to what happened with Kyle Beach, that's why we have to look at Chicago and Arizona as comparables. Ottawa and Arizona as comparables as opposed to the Kyle Beach situation and this. I think people still just want to know why it's being viewed in the light that it's being viewed at. So I appreciate the explanation there.
Well, and the other thing you have to remember in all of these cases, it's at the commissioner's. Basically, the commissioner has a lot of power in the constitution of the NHL and built into the CBA. And if you want to ultimately say, why did this happen and that happen? Well, I mean, it's because that's what Gary Bettman ruled. I mean, that it's actually not more complicated than that. It's at the commissioner's discretion, the kind of fine that Chicago got. And that's what the commissioner thought was appropriate. And he has that power. That it's not do you know what I mean? Like this isn't a jury trial or something. There's not like 12 people in the NHL office and they consider the facts. I mean, it lands on Gary Bettman's desk. And so I think if you want to be critical of how this was adjudicated, it starts and ends with him.
I agree with that. Last thing on the Ottawa Senators with Steve Staios as interim GM. What's the plan there? What's the plan for a potential replacement?
Well, I think they'll be patient. And remember, I mean, a lot of the people they're going to probably look to hire or interview are working for other teams right now. Not necessarily something other teams might want to do in November or December or January, whenever the process starts to really get going, is allow their people to speak to the Senators. And so I think it could very well take some time. And ultimately, I think Steve Staios has to decide, like, I don't see any circumstance where he's not doing the job for the next few months anyway, just because of, again, the timing of all this. He was already the head of the hockey operations department here for the last month or so after being named president. I think ultimately, kind of like we saw with Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh over the summer, he'll have to decide, does he feel like he needs to bring someone else in? Does he want to do the job himself? And he's going to get a chance to, I think, understand that better because he's essentially going to be doing the job now for the next few months of the season. And so, we'll see where it goes. If they do end up having a full search, one thing I'll point you to is Michael Andlauer was part of the search committee when Montreal named Kent Hughes the GM. He was obviously a minority owner of the Canadiens at the time, but he was involved in all the interview process there. And so I would think a lot of the names that surfaced in that search would probably would make sense that they would get a shot in Ottawa. And so I look at someone like Matthew Darsh, who's the assistant GM in Tampa, who's obviously had a lot of interest from lots of teams. But he was in there right till the end in the Montreal situation. I think that he'll get a look. I mean, maybe even someone who works for the Canadiens like John Sedgwick, who does the salary cap and CBA stuff for them and who would have worked with Andlauer. I think that we can start to look for names in that sort of, basically who did the Canadiens want to hire 2 years ago and it didn't happen. I think would be a natural place as we start to inevitably point to candidates, but it's premature for that. And it really does sound like Ottawa is going to take its time. And so Steve Staios is going to run the team for the next little while here, and we'll see where they end up with their general manager search.
Peter Chiarelli's name was thrown out. Does that do anything for you?
A lot of people are saying that. I've got no information that suggests that that's happening or is in the works. But I'm not out here refuting reports. I just don't have anything tangible myself to link Peter to Ottawa. I mean, I know he worked there in the past and all that, but I don't know how that's going to go down, but there's a lot of smoke about that. I can't confirm any of those reports with my own reporting. I don't know where that's going to go.
Okay. Honesty is the best policy, and we'll definitely continue to follow the Ottawa Senators as their season continues to unfold. I'm just telling you, just going through the timeline, going through all the stuff they've endured the last little while. Yes, it's basically a season's worth of drama.
Remember,
Insane.
What's that saying? You don't want to be the main subject of hockey Twitter. They've been the main subject.
You never want to be the main character. You never want to be the main character on Twitter, period.
Right. Well, they've been the main character for like 4 of the last 7 days or something like that. So.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway,
They probably can't wait till Thursday's game. They need to play a game. They need to win. Just get things back to normal around there.
Yeah, it's just to kind of take the heat off of them as they host the Los Angeles Kings. Let's see how that game goes. Let's get to Sports Interaction and the rest of our Thursday edition of the CJ Show.
It's all part of the game. Yeah, I just gotta go hard.
Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs on the Sports Interaction website. A novelty special for them. When will the San Jose Sharks win their first game this season? Next game, odds are at 2.7 to 1. Games 2 and 3 from now, 2.5 to 1. 4 or 5 games from now, odds are at 6 to 1. Game 6, more than 6 games from now, 6.5 to 1. What say you, CJ? Do you have the schedule in front of you? For those who don't know, we're recording on a Thursday. The Sharks play the Canucks. The Penguins are up on the schedule. The Flyers are on the schedule. The Oilers, the Sharks too. What say you?
Well, I would say it doesn't make much sense to predict them to beat the Canucks because you could just bet them 3-1 on the money line. You're only getting 2.7 on this bet. So if you really believe in them, you should probably just take them straight up in Thursday's game. I'm inclined for the value to go the 6+. And like that's tough because let's face it, even in this league, like any team can sort of beat any team on any given night. Even some of the teams that struggle, but it's not that easy of a schedule immediately before San Jose. Like I'm not looking at any of those games and saying, hey, that's a total toss up, and they're going to be pretty decided underdogs in all those games. So I would probably make the chaos bet and say that it could be 6+. I mean, that's a tough prediction. I'm saying they're going to go 14 games into the season without a win.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
without a win.
I believe Anaheim might have ended last season with 14 games without a win. So, I mean, it's possible, but the Sharks are in a tough spot. They're, clearly, they're a team that's decidedly in the draft lottery situation. And I don't see an easy game for them at any point here.
sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. sportsinteraction.com/SDPN.
Hey, it's me. I don't usually do these, but I'm doing this one. Here, let me get into character. I cover the Flames. I disagree with CJ on chocolate. All right, I'm ready. If you could trade a bench warmer for the GOAT, you'd do it, right? Get your business a game-changing pickup by choosing the commerce platform with the internet's best converting checkout. It's Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, is that a thing that we're not? Shopify is the only tool you need to start, run, and grow your business without the hassle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed sneakers or, figurines behind you that are not dolls, they're figurines, Shopify will help you with that very legitimate business. Once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout, which means you're going to turn browsers into buyers. For a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Johnston. Ooh, he's fancy. He's got that. Shopify.com/Johnston, all lowercase. Do you ever feel like your brain gets in its own way? I do. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, so it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you need to do, just fill out a questionnaire and you'll get matched up with a licensed therapist. And if you want to switch therapists, that's fine. You can switch at any time at no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Johnston. That's betterhelp.com/Johnston to get 10% off your first month.
CJ, we talked about the unfortunate passing of Adam Johnson a couple of days ago, the former Pittsburgh Penguin who was involved in a horrific skate accident. And since then, there has been talk about whether or not neck guards should be mandatory for professional hockey players. We've seen the English Ice Hockey Association in the UK mandate it for players. This week, we've seen the Western Hockey League in North America mandate it for players. We're seeing that NHL teams like the Penguins the Bruins, the Hurricanes, and the Capitals are all looking into mandating it for their players. I would love to know your thoughts on some of these changes that we're seeing. Is it the way to go? I know I've been speaking to a couple players myself about this. I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
Well, it's amazing to me how quickly, if we go back to our show last Thursday and had this been a topic, I would say no chance, right? Because you basically haven't seen a player wear a neck guard in the NHL in how long? I mean, it's just not been part of the conversation. It's not been, I don't think, a serious consideration. In recent years, lots of players have put on the sleeves to protect their wrists and all sorts of other, the socks that can protect from skate cuts, protection down around your Achilles. But you haven't seen neck guards. And all of a sudden now, and I suppose this makes sense. I mean, there's been a tragedy, and it's really brought to the forefront how freak an accident can be, how quickly something can happen, and why wouldn't you at least look into trying to put yourself in a position where you could protect yourself if that happened. And so the fact that you have already one of the Canadian Junior Leagues, the WHL, doing this, you have the Penguins with their AHL team in Wilkes-Barre have mandated neck protection for their players. I know there's more teams that are looking at instituting it at the AHL level. And then now you have at least a few NHL teams where players are going to start doing it in practice, which seems to me is a step towards some of them finding protection in a game. Like that's a lot that's changed in 5 days to have that kind of demand. I mean, I've heard from the manufacturers are basically sold out, that this wave of demand, for the reasons I'm kind of outlining here, there's no way to foresee this. And now all of a sudden every team and every league is looking to get the equipment in place. What I can tell you too is there's currently 3 types of neck protection that's approved for use by NHL players. It sounds like there's going to be an expedited process here where there's going to be more options that will be approved. The league's office has to approve every new piece of equipment that's basically eligible to be used. And so, the takeaway is I don't think you're going to see it mandated that every NHL player has to wear neck protection. That might be a ways off, but it's clear we're going to now see it be something that's used in the league. And it's still we haven't even, had the funeral services yet for Adam Johnson. So I don't want to be saying that this is a good thing that can come from a death, but I mean, clearly it wasn't something people just, breezed by and said, okay, well, that's, that happened over there, could never happen to me. I think that it's clear evidence to me that this really resonated pretty strongly in the hockey community. And I think that now the manufacturers hopefully are, you're going to meet that demand, and not just by producing the products they have, but by advancing what's out there and making the equipment even more safe, moving forward than what we have available today.
Yeah. At least one player I spoke to yesterday expressed the fact that, it was a horrific tragedy, but they emphasized a lot on how they hope that players still have the choice to wear it or not. I know maybe we're still ways away from having anything just kind of mandated for everyone in the NHL to do it, but what do you think of the idea of players at least still having the choice to wear this protection in the NHL or not, even as more and more leagues or more players are at least starting to think about wearing them?
Well, I think it's going to be grandfathered. Honestly, whenever we get to the day, and look, in the AHL this year, that the wrist sleeves are mandated. I've been told by someone who monitors that there's literally been zero pushback from players. And so that's going well, at least evidently to this point in the season. I would suggest to you that's maybe where we see the first bit of grandfathering come into the NHL, is that, okay, we've tried this in the AHL and the ECHL and no one's complaining. There's been no issues, no incidents, no cuts. Eventually maybe for next season, we'll see. I mean, there's a GM's meeting on November 14th. And so I think we'll get a little more clarity in 2 weeks here. But maybe that's where it gets grandfathered in. And then, I think neck protection would probably fall behind that, just because it hasn't been tested to the same degree. There's not the same amount of variety of product out there, at least at this point in time. So, I think that the player that told you that is going to get the choice, because I assume it's a player that's already in the NHL. Future players probably won't get the choice. And I'm okay with that. I think that, I really do believe that it's okay that the players today want that choice. Some of them haven't had it. They understand there's risks and liabilities. I mean, we're talking about adults in the end, right? I'm sure I made the point on our Monday show that if you're looking to apply heat anywhere, it's probably on USA Hockey, and the fact that it's not mandatory that all kids that play, minor hockey in the US have to wear neck protection. I think that would be a good place to start. Just if we're looking at this discussion from 30,000 feet, as it relates to NHL players, probably won't be mandated, but I think it'll be grandfathered eventually the way visors were. And I haven't heard any player complain about a visor in the last 10 years, right? I mean, obviously there's still some that have the ability not to wear one, but anyone new coming into the league has worn one up through junior ranks or in the NCAA or in Europe, wherever they learn the game. They get to the NHL and there's no option to take it off. You're still just wearing it. And so I think that's the path that this will follow. It's just going to probably take a little bit of time where everyone's going to grow up wearing neck protection in minor hockey. If they go to the CHL now, I mean, based on the WHL's introduction of this rule, you're going to still wear it. And then when you get to the American Hockey League and the NHL eventually, in whether it's 2 or 3 or 5 years time, you just keep it on. And I think that's probably the best way to do it versus telling a 32-year-old right now or what have you, you have to wear this. I mean, the key is, the teams you mentioned, they're encouraging their players to wear it. I think that they've made a conscious effort to try to order a bunch of equipment and give them different options, but ultimately they can't mandate it at the NHL level. And so, yes, I think choice will remain for those that are already in the league, but the choice will be made for the future generations. And I think that's just fine.
Okay. So that's where we stand on that with neck guards. We'll continue to go around the league here. One big player suspension as we continue to talk about player safety coming up this week with Charlie McAvoy and a 4-game suspension handed to him for a really dangerous hit to the head on Oliver Ekman-Larsson of the Florida Panthers. What did you think of the hit? What did you think of the ensuing judgment passed down after that?
Well, it's pretty notable to me. This is already the second suspension of 4 games this season. I mean, 4 games is a significant suspension. It's a meaningful chunk of the season. If you look in Charlie McAvoy's case, it's going to cost him $200,000 in salary that goes to the player's emergency fund. And, I think it's a justified suspension. I mean, really, there's 2 issues with that hit. It's very late, so it's interference, and he clearly makes contact with Oliver Ekman-Larsson's head. And so I think you combine those 2 together. I mean, you might have made a case even for something a little longer than 4 games. Charlie McAvoy was suspended in the playoffs in 2019 for a head hit as well. And so, that doesn't make him a repeat offender. If you remember, it's any offense within the last 18 months, but it's still part of his history. And so, I think that, I don't have any issue with it, but we're seeing player safety. I don't know if it's just between the Rasmus Andersson suspension and then this one. I don't know if there's a mandate to be a little bit more strict or stringent, but I mean, those are 2 suspensions longer than any suspension we saw last year. And we're not even through a full month of the NHL schedule yet. So, I think that those are pretty strong statements for me compared to what we're used to with, it almost seems like they're looking to trend to have lesser suspensions. I mean, 4 games is a lot of games.
I just like the fact that there's some semblance of consistency. Would I have liked to have seen more games for the Charlie McAvoy hit? Sure. I think it was a very dangerous hit, but the fact that both of those hits, the Rasmus Andersson hit and the Charlie McAvoy hit, are at 4 games, to me, at the very least, we don't have to talk about whether or not they're just coming up with random numbers. Like I think that's a pretty solid foundation for the Department of Player Safety to build on for the season.
Right. And if we see another bad head check, I mean, I think that we'll all be looking for 4 games for it. I mean, depending who throws it and all the circumstances, but I'm with you. I don't see much controversy there. I didn't notice. I don't know if this one generated a lot of debate or discussion. It kind of felt like even some of the Boston-based people that sometimes watch the game through black and gold glasses. I didn't see too many of them raising issue with it either. I think it was a pretty open and shut case, and no appeal here the way there was in the Rasmus Andersson situation. I think it's the punishment it should be, and it's a strong message to other players about being diligent not to pick the head in those kind of open ice checks.
Yeah, I think if anything, there was the waiting period when we heard about the phone hearing where people thought, okay, well, is this going to get less? Is there going to be the Boston bias? Or there were a lot of people who were just kind of throwing all that stuff around before the suspension. And then once the number came out, everyone just kind of looked around and said, huh, okay, that seems right. I think if anything, I don't think there was anything controversial. You're absolutely right on that. I think it was more just what the hell were they going to do in advance of that? But yeah, 4 games. I think we can all live with that when it comes to Charlie McAvoy.
Damn right.
Let's move to the next topic here. Nicklas Backstrom of the Washington Capitals stepping away from the game. That was announced on Wednesday. 1 point in his last 8 games. We know he previously had resurfacing surgery on his left hip last year. I don't want to say this is the end for Nicklas Backstrom. I would be very surprised if he makes a return after this latest setback for him. What are your thoughts on Nicklas Backstrom and this latest news?
I mean, you hate hearing or seeing a player who, especially when he's had the kind of career, who's been the gentleman Nicklas Backstrom has been through his career, basically having his body, at a point where he's not sure if he can continue on. I mean, I think that's the way to read it. It's fair to acknowledge it could be the end of the line for him. I would say that he's hoping it's not the end of the line and maybe wondering if some time away, if there's some sort of treatment he can do, maybe some rest that can get him back to a spot where he feels he can play and move around the ice properly. But, it's a tough situation. This hip resurfacing procedure he had is not unlike the one Patrick Kane had, not unlike the one that Jesse Puljujarvi had. And obviously in Kane and Puljujarvi's case, those are 2 guys hoping to come back, that are going to be free agents here and probably going to be signing in the relatively near future with NHL teams. And this illustrates some of the challenges there. I mean, Nicklas Backstrom was a point a game player for 14 years in the NHL. Then he has the season where he basically is dealing with the hip issue, his deteriorating left hip. Before he does the surgery where you see a pretty sharp decline in his points, he returns last year for half a year and just does not produce the way he has. And then 1 point through 8 games this year. I mean, it just, the trend, if you put that on a graph, is not encouraging. And, I think if there's a positive here, I mean, if this is the end, what a marvelous career. You play over 1,000 games, you get over 1,000 points, win a Stanley Cup. I would suggest those are Hall of Fame credentials for Nicklas Backstrom. Him and Ovechkin will kind of be remembered as they were pretty forceful duo in their heyday. And, let's hope perhaps there's something that can be done that allows him to continue his career. He's signed through next season. And so there doesn't have to be a decision necessarily here. It sounds like the team's being pretty supportive of allowing him this time. It's essentially kind of a leave of absence from the game. And, it's a tough spot. I mean, yeah, on one hand, it's like, okay, if he doesn't play, say for the rest of the season, or even if we just know he's going to be out for months, they could put his contract on LTIR and get $9.2 million in cap space. But, you're not finding Nicklas Backstrom out there even for that kind of cap space at this point in time. And so, yeah, kind of a crossroads moment. I'm interested to see, Brian McClellan, the general manager of the Capitals, is going to speak to the media on Friday, and he might give a little bit more insight into exactly how the organization is going to approach this in terms of do they get aggressive now? Do they look to make trades and use that money, or are they just going to kind of just let it lie and see where Backstrom ends up before making any more roster tweaks or decisions?
Okay. Well said on the part of Nicklas Backstrom. One last topic before we get to stick taps here. CJ's latest. What I'm hearing about NHL rookies chasing their 10th game. We know how some guys are trying to stick around on rosters before they get sent to junior, or some of them have already earned the opportunity to stay with their teams, like Matt Poitras in Boston. What are you hearing about certain rookies trying to stick around on NHL rosters before their 10th game or around their 10th game?
Well, the good news for those rookies is a lot of them are guaranteed to get that 10th game. It does sound as though a number of the guys on that list are guaranteed to play 10. And for those that aren't familiar with the rule, just quickly, I mean, you make the roster and you play 1 or 2 or 3 games. That's equivalent to like getting the first date. It's really exciting. Obviously, it's a great moment in your career. You start to earn an NHL paycheck, but you're not really officially on the team. I mean, the 10-game mark is where the team has to make a decision on you, because it does start the clock officially on your contract. It has some effects down the road, CBA wise, for the teams. And so it's really the first mile marker. It's almost like your 3-month probation. And if you take a typical job in the world, it's like where the company has to decide, hey, do we want to keep going here? And so it's a pretty encouraging time for players. That's why it was such a big deal for Matthew Poitras, for example, in Boston, because he's a 2nd-round pick in 2022. He came to their camp with 0 guarantees. There was obviously an opening there. He's a center with Bergeron and Krejci retiring over the summer, but there was other players to give a job to much easier ahead of him. And he earns that first run in 9 games, and he's just been a regular member of a team that's 8-0-1. Probably made the job easy for them. He's been productive. They haven't had to shelter him to a crazy degree. Like, he's just playing regular minutes on a team that's winning a lot of games. He's helping them win. And so he gets his 10th game Thursday against Toronto. Connor Bedard, no surprise. We won't even spend time on that. He's going to get a 10th game here. Kevin Korchinski, defenseman in Chicago. He's going to get a 10th game. Pavel Mintyukov in Anaheim, someone we should start to pay more attention to, has had a really strong start in Anaheim. He's getting a 10th game, or got his 10th game. Logan Cooley in Arizona is going to get a 10th game. David Jirasek and Adam Fantilli, both of Columbus, are going to get their 10th game. So really the first, 7-8 guys in that position are going to, that's all going to happen here in the next few days. The most interesting one I'll point your attention to, Julian, is Zach Benson in Buffalo. Unfortunately, he's dealt with a lower body injury, missed 3 games in October. He's been shut down again this week. And he sits at 6 games right now for the Sabres. And I think there's going to be a big decision on him when he is healthy. There's an option actually to send him once he is healthy to the American Hockey League on a conditioning loan that doesn't affect, obviously, his status with the NHL team. That could be up to 2 weeks. So that could buy them some time on the decision to see where he's at and allow him to get back up to speed. But it won't be long, of course, before he could play 4 more games for the Sabres. And I think they're going to have to make a call. And so, I think that the team definitely, my sense is taking an open mind to that. But, he's one that could get sent back. Maybe he gets sent to the World Junior team in December, because that's only a month or so away before those calls will be coming out from Hockey Canada. But he's probably the one to watch that could go the other way. But we're having a lot of rookies stick around the league this year. Is one of my takeaways. More than you'd expect, and it's not all just the 1st and 2nd and 3rd overall pick type of guys. Leo Carlson's another one I didn't mention from Anaheim that'll be sticking around too. But someone like Poitras, who's wouldn't have been on our radar too firmly heading into the season.
Yeah, there was an episode we were doing a couple days ago. We were trying to figure out how to say his last name.
That was embarrassing.
We have since figured it out, and I think we're going to be saying it quite a few times if he continues to play as well as he has been playing. By the way, since that post, Logan Cooley has since scored his first NHL goal, which was really sick, by the way.
Yeah, he's had a great start. I know that the speed that he's shown is something that's really impressed the management in Arizona. I think like any player, like we could apply this sort of thought to Connor Bedard or any of those players. It's like, okay, it's still going to take some time for him to really feel himself out and get comfortable. But he's been very productive in his first 9 games in the league, and there was just no thought to sending him anywhere else. I would suggest he's probably there all year to stay, although all these teams will tell you, look, the evaluation continues, because they don't have to make that proclamation. 10 games starts the contract, but we've seen players play 10 games and still be sent back to junior or wherever their rights are held.
Okay. And we've reached the stick taps portion of our show. This is where we show some love. Sometimes we opt for the cross-check option, but we only do that.
We've kind of retired that, it feels like.
Oh, we've retired it?
Well, I'm not saying...
You haven't used it in a while.
Yeah, like who's the last person you cross-checked?
Elon Musk.
Oh man.
Yeah. I get it. Anyway, we don't need to rehash that. But yeah, we normally just use it for positive stuff. Do you have someone you'd like to stick tap this week?
I haven't thought about it.
Well, to be quite honest with you, there's really 2 options to go with it. You can use it in the there are 2 players that kind of come to mind for me in terms of player retirements this week. Joe Thornton I think is deserving of a stick tap with his Hall of Fame career and his credentials. I still can't believe that he was still active up until this week. Thomas Mechanics was going to be my pick for a stick tap. A player who's played over 1,000 games in the NHL, most of the Montreal Canadiens, and there was like that 17 game stretch where he was a Toronto Maple Leaf plus a first round series and all of that.
He went head to head in one of those games against Boston with Bergeron. I remember the Leafs. They needed. I can't remember if it was an injury or what, but I remember he was like hard matching Bergeron in one of those games. Late career Thomas Plekanec wearing blue and white was bizarre.
Just very, very bizarre. And I think Lou Lamoriello was still GM too, so I'm sure the facial hair rules were very much in effect. My favorite Plecky moment will be when he scored in overtime of Game 1 of the 2010 first round series between the Canadiens and the Washington Capitals, a series the Canadiens had no business winning, and they started off that series with an overtime winner, and Plekanec, of all people, scores that overtime winner. That was, I know there's a lot of Canadiens fans who will grow up and they've grown up and have seen the run in 2021 where they end up going to the Cup final against Tampa, but for a lot of people, especially my age, the run that sticks out in a lot of people's minds is that 2010 run. And that game, that moment from Plecky is what starts it all for everyone of that particular generation.
There you go. And don't forget, Paul Stastny also announced his retirement via Pierre LeBrun this week. So
absolutely.
It's funny in all these cases, like Joe Thornton has been retired. I think he just finally got around to recording a video and saying, I'm retired. Like, I think the decision had long been since made. Of course, he was shirtless on that video. And he immediately becomes Canada's Spengler Cup general manager, or I don't know what his title is, but he's helping put together the Spengler Cup team with Brad Pascal. So,
yes,
moving
co-general managers.
There you go. Moving right into a management role at the national team level. His wife, of course, is from Davos, Switzerland, and he played for HC Davos a couple times, which is where the Spengler Cup is held. So that's kind of a fitting way for him to spend the holidays. So yeah, let's stick tap to former players. Who are moving their way into other careers now. Some of them probably end up working with us in media. It just seems to be the way.
Yeah, look, I'm all for it, man. I think anytime
Although
you see
Plecky's staying in check. I mean, he was already playing in Kladno.
Yeah, he's not joining us in the media side. That's not happening.
No, that's not his personality at all.
It's okay. Live your life. Anyway, that's going to do it for the Thursday edition of the CJ Show. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new episode. Leave us a like on YouTube. Leave us a rating wherever you listen to us on podcasts. And leave us with a question, whether on Twitter or on Discord, so we can get to it on Monday. All you have to do is use the hashtag AskCJ. Unless if you're on Discord, you don't need to use hashtags there. But still, just use it for, because we'd like for you to use it. We're trying to make that a thing. We've been making it a thing. Just continue to make Ask CJ a thing. We love it. CJ, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I hope everyone enjoys their Halloween candy, and I'm sure all the Aero bars are already eaten. So, I mean, that's the only sad part about November.
The only thing that's sad is the fact that you're propping up Aero as a valid chocolate bar. Yeah, I'm on to you with that photo, by the way. I know what you were trying to do when you posted that photo of your basket of chocolates and candy, which was actually a very good assortment. And I think a lot of people were paying those compliments to you about how good it was looking because there weren't any Aero bars in that. I don't think it was because of the fact you had them at some point in that basket. I'm calling you out on that, brother. The way you try to make it seem as if, Aero is this elite tier chocolate bar is absolutely ridiculous. The fact that you have to lie to people to hype up that, do you have a sponsorship with them? Like, seriously, do you have a sponsorship with Aero? Because it's not that good of a chocolate bar. It's not that good of a chocolate bar.
I'm telling
you, the fact
you,
that you are propping it up to this
when
point,
the kids
where
were
you're
coming
making
up,
it seem as if it's an elite chocolate bar.
When the kids were coming up on
ridiculous.
Halloween,
it's ASA 9, it's ASA 10, ASA 11,
I was
ASA 12,
holding the
ASA
bowl.
13. It's ridiculous that you're doing this. And
I
the
was
fact that you're
holding the
getting
bowl.
away with it on the internet is an absolute joke. And you should be ashamed of yourself for lying to the people about Aero. I get it. This is what it is. Like, you really, really should be ashamed of yourself.
My man, I just held the bowl out whenever anyone came up. And I said, pick a couple bars, whatever you like. And I'm telling you, the kids were just scooping the Aeros. Aeros and Kit Kats were doing good business on my Halloween step.
Well, did Drew Livingstone, our producer for this week, thank you, Producer Drew, for tapping in for Producer Nick this week, by the way. Did Producer Nick, sorry, not Producer Nick, did Producer Drew show up to your house?
He did not, unless he was wearing a full costume. I didn't recognize him.
Well, at this point, I would believe that he would, because he's the only other person I could think of who would have such egregious takes on chocolate. But you know what? At least unlike him, you have cranberry sauce as opposed to beets at Thanksgiving. And with that, that's going to do it for the Thursday edition of the CJ Show. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long, and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction, your homegrown sportsbook. Always remember to bet local.
Inside the game twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.